The bank statement was on my kitchen table, and the numbers on it seemed wrong. I took off my glasses, wiped them with an old napkin, and put them back on, as if that would change reality. The account balance showed $237.80 instead of the $82,300 that should have been there. I slowly lowered myself into the chair, feeling a chill creep into my chest. 82,000 was my savings from 40 years as a ship's engineer. The money from the sale of Martha's house after her death 3 years ago. My airbag. All I had left of my old life. My fingers trembled as I dialed the bank's number. The answering machine suggested I press the number 1 to check my balance, the number 2 for recent transactions. I pressed 2 and heard a mechanical voice reading out the transaction history. October 27, a transfer in the amount of $81,700. The recipient is Emma Crawford. Emma, wife of my only son, Jason. I hung up the phone and walked to the living room, where the pictures were on the dresser. Martha was smiling at me from a picture of our golden wedding. Next to it was a picture of Jason with his college diploma. Then there was Jason's wedding picture with Emma from 5 years ago. Emma looked content and confident, her hand resting on Jason's arm possessively, as if she was claiming what was hers. I remembered the day they'd met. Jason had brought her to a family dinner in honor of my 70th birthday. I'd thought then that she was too good for my son, beautiful, well-groomed, with the confident manners of a businesswoman. Martha whispered to me in the kitchen that the girl seemed calculating, but I brushed her words aside. Martha was sometimes too suspicious of people. Now I realized my wife was right. I remembered how Jason had come to me a year and a half ago with an offer to help manage the bank accounts. "Dad, you're not young anymore," my son had said then, sitting in the same chair where I was sitting now. "What if something happens? What if you forget your password or lose your card? Let me become a trustee on your account, just to be safe." It sounded caring and reasonable at the time. After Martha died, I did forget important things sometimes. Confused passwords, lost documents. Technology was changing too fast for a 72-year-old man. Banks were moving to online systems, requiring two-factor authentication, instituting new security procedures every few months. I agreed at the time. Jason worked as a technical writer for a software company, and he understood modern technology better than I did. It seemed reasonable to trust him to help with online banking and other digital wisdom. Jason had access to the accounts, passwords, all the necessary credentials. But now I realized it wasn't just Jason who had access. Emma worked as an event coordinator at the local Harborview Hotel, and she was a savvy and ambitious woman. Too ambitious for Tonatown and for her husband, who was content with a modest salary as a technical writer. I always saw something predatory in her eyes when she looked at our family property, the house I'd bequeathed to Jason, the mentions of my savings. I remembered her once asking exactly how much money I had set aside for retirement. It was last summer, and we were sitting on the porch after a family dinner, and the conversation turned to the cost of health care for the elderly. "Edward," she said then, sipping white wine from a glass, "have you ever thought about investing your savings? Interest rates on deposits are so low. I know a financial advisor who helps people your age earn more income." I replied at the time that I prefer simple bank deposits. Money should be safe, not risked for the sake of extra profit. Emma smiled and nodded, but I noticed her eyes sparkle when I mentioned the approximate amount. The phone rang. Jason's name popped up on the screen. "Hi, Dad." My son's voice sounded his usual calm, friendly self. "How are you doing?" "Jason," I tried to keep my voice steady, "I need to talk to you. About the bank account." Pause, too long a pause. "What about it? Did something happen?" There was a note of concern in his voice. Was it genuine or fake? "Can you come over? I'll be right there." "Dad, I'm at work. I have a project deadline. How about tonight?" "No, now. It's important." One more pause. I could hear Jason talking to someone in the background, covering the phone with his hand. A woman's voice was saying something fast, but I couldn't make out the words. "Okay, Dad, I'll be there in half an hour." I hung up the phone and picked up the bank statement again. October 27th. That was 10 days ago, just when Emma had mentioned that she wanted to go to her sister's house for a vacation. a sister who supposedly lived in California and needed support after a difficult divorce. I tried to remember exactly what Emma had said about her sister. It seems she worked in the travel industry, had recently lost her job, and her husband had left her for a younger coworker. The story sounded plausible, but now I doubted every word I'd ever heard from Emma. I made my way to the kitchen and put the kettle on. My hands weren't shaking anymore. 40 years of working in the engine room had taught me how to stay calm in critical situations. When the main engine broke down in mid-Atlantic, when a storm threatened to sink the ship, when a fire engulfed the cargo hold, in all these situations, panic meant death. That was exactly the situation now. Outside the window, it was raining, drops dripping down the glass, blurring the outlines of the neighboring houses. Tauntown looked gray and dreary in the October weather, but I loved this town. It was where I'd lived most of my life, where I'd met Martha, where Jason had been born and raised, where I'd buried my wife, where I was going to spend the rest of my days. But it took money, money that was now gone. The kettle whistled. I brewed a strong black tea and sat down at the table, spreading out all the documents in front of me. A bank statement, a copy of the power of attorney I'd signed a year and a half ago, some old checks. I studied each paper methodically, trying to figure out exactly how the theft had happened. My mind was swarming with thoughts of what I would tell Jason once I found out the truth. My son could have been an accomplice, or he could have been victimized by his wife, just like me. Jason had always been gullible, too gullible for this world. As a child, he'd believed everyone he met, and at school, he'd often been the object of pranks from his classmates because of his naivete. But deep down, I already knew the truth. I knew who was behind the disappearance of my money. Emma had always been too smart for her own good, too ambitious to settle for life as a technical writer's wife in provincial Town. Jason arrived 40 minutes later, not half an hour as promised. I watched as he parked his white Honda by the sidewalk and sat in the car for a few seconds, talking on the phone about something. His face looked tense even through the wet glass of the living room. When he finally entered the house, he headed straight for me with a memorized smile. "Sorry I'm late, Dad. Traffic on Main Street." "Have a seat." I nodded at the chair across the hall. "Sonar, would you like some tea?" "No, thanks. What happened to the bank account?" I put the statement on the coffee table where he could see it. "Here's what happened." Jason leaned over, studying the numbers. His face paled when he reached the line about the transfer. There was silence in the room for a few seconds, broken only by the sound of rain hitting the windows. "Yeah, I don't understand," he mumbled at last. "How is it possible?" "You tell me. You have access to the account." "Dad, I would never take your money. You know that." I studied his face. The surprise looked genuine, but years at sea had taught me not to trust first impressions. People can lie, especially when they have something to hide. Then explain to me how Emma had access to my accounts. Jason froze as if he'd been punched. His mouth dropped open, but no words came out. In that silence, I found the answer to my question. "You gave her the passwords," I said calmly. "No, I mean," he ran his hand through his hair, "she sometimes helped me with computer stuff when I was busy, but only to check balances or print out statements for you. When was the last time you saw her?" She went to her sister's, Monday, October 27th, the day of the money transfer." "Which sister?" "Rachel. In San Diego. She's having trouble with her divorce, so Emma's there to support her." I got up and went to the window. The rain was getting heavier, turning the street into a blur of gray and brown. "When would she be back?" "In a week." "Why, Dad, you don't think Emma—" "What I think doesn't matter. What matters is what happened to my money." After Jason left, I sat in silence for a long time, thinking about the conversation. My son was either complicit in the theft or victimized by his wife, like me. But his confusion seemed genuine. Jason had always been a bad actor. As a kid, I could always tell when he was lying by his face and demeanor. Emma was probably taking advantage of his gullibility, asking for help with complicated banking procedures, supposedly for my own good. Jason, always willing to help both his father and his wife, shared passwords with her, unaware of her true intentions. I called the bank. I knew the customer service number by heart. I'd had to call there quite a few times over the years for various issues. The answering machine offered a whole menu of options, and I pressed 0 to connect to an operator. First National Bank of Tontai Town. My name is Jennifer. How can I help you? Sachur Forn. I need to get details on a transfer from my account. October 27th. Of course, sir. Please give me the account number and your full name. I dictated the details and went through the identification procedure. Mother's maiden name, last 4 digits of the social number, mailing address. Yes, I see the transaction. Transfer in the amount of $81,700. The recipient is Emma Crawford. The transfer was initiated through online banking at 4:30 p.m. Who exactly initiated the transfer? The transaction was made using your credentials, Mr. Crawford. My credentials? But I didn't initiate any transfer. Pause. I could hear the keys banging on the other end of the line. Sir, I'm sorry, but if you have reason to believe that a transaction was made without your consent, you need to file a fraud report. I can transfer you to the security department. I spent the next half hour explaining the situation to the bank security specialist. The man with the official voice explained the investigation procedure to me, informed me that the account would be temporarily blocked, and I had to report to the branch with documents and a written statement. The investigation would take 10 to 45 days. In the meantime, am I supposed to live on $200? I asked. Unfortunately, sir, until the investigation is complete, we cannot restore funds to the account. I hung up the phone and sat in silence for a while, pondering the situation. $200 would be enough for a week at the most if you save on everything. Pension payments won't come until 2 weeks from now. That would not be enough. It continued to rain outside the window, and I remembered Martha's words to me after my mother died. Trouble doesn't come alone. It brings its friends with it. At the time, I had thought it was just the sad philosophy of an old woman. Now I realized how right she was. First, Martha died, leaving me alone in an empty house. Then came the health problems, arthritis, heart problems, failing eyesight. Now the theft of money. It was like someone was methodically dismantling my life brick by brick, leaving only the bare foundations. But I was a marine engineer. 40 years at sea taught me not to give up when things go wrong. When an engine breaks down in the middle of the ocean, when storm waves flood the deck, when the crew loses faith in the possibility of rescue, it's at times like these that an engineer must keep a clear mind and find a solution. I needed help, and I knew who to turn to. Frank Harris retired from the Town Police Department 5 years ago, but we kept in touch. We met back in the 70s when he was a young patrolman, and I worked on cargo ships. Back then, there was a theft of a container of expensive electronics in the harbor, and Frank was interviewing witnesses. I remember that day vividly. It was early morning. The fog was lifting off the water, and a young policeman in an overly large uniform was methodically interviewing anyone who could see anything. Most harbor workers were distrustful of the police, but Frank was different. He asked the right questions, listened to the answers, didn't try to pressure or intimidate. Then our paths crossed from time to time. Town is a small town. Everyone knows each other. Frank married a nurse from the local hospital, bought a house 3 blocks from mine, raised 2 daughters. When Martha died, he came to visit us, bringing his wife flowers, me a bottle of good whiskey. During his years of service, Frank rose to detective and earned a reputation as a meticulous and honest cop. He was good at finding people who didn't want to be found, good at pulling information from the most unexpected sources. If anyone could help me get to the bottom of Emma, it was him. I knew Frank's cell phone by heart. He answered after the 3rd ring. This is Harris. Frank, it's Ed Crawford. I need your help. Ed, haven't heard your voice in a long time. What's the matter? I briefly told him the situation. Frank listened in silence, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I finished, he was silent for a few seconds. I see. Classic family theft. Wife accesses the accounts through her husband, then disappears with the money. I've seen dozens of cases like this in my career. What do you want me to do? First of all, you did the right thing by going to the bank. Make it an official investigation. Second, we need to find this Emma and find out exactly where she is and what she's doing with the money. Jason says she's at her sister's in San Diego. Frank grinned. A sister in San Diego is a classic, Ed. I'll bet my pension that there's no sister. Or there is, but she doesn't have Emma at all. Can you check? I can try. I have a few old friends who are still in the service, but I'd need Emma's details, full name, date of birth, social security number if you know. I don't know, but I can check with Jason. You do that. Oh, and Ed, be careful with your son. I realize he's your blood, but money makes people unpredictable. Maybe he knows more than he's letting on. After talking to Frank, I was somewhat relieved. At least now I had a plan of action. I wasn't going to sit back and wait for the bank to finish its investigation. In the evening, I made a simple dinner of pasta with canned tomato sauce. Martha used to cook elaborate meals, spending hours in the kitchen, experimenting with new recipes. After she died, I learned to settle for simple meals. Not because I couldn't cook, it just didn't make sense to try for one person. During dinner, I thought about Emma, trying to remember all the suspicious moments in her behavior over the past few months. There were quite a few if you look closely. During the summer, she'd often stayed late at work, citing important hotel events. But when I called the Harbor View one evening to give her a message from Jason, the receptionist said Emma had gone home 2 hours ago. In August, she'd gone to visit a friend in a neighboring state for the weekend, but had come back with a tan that couldn't possibly show up in rainy Maine in late summer. In September, I noticed she was studying travel brochures about Central America. When I asked about it, Emma said she was planning a surprise for Jason for their wedding anniversary. But their anniversary is in May, and it was more than 6 months away. All those little things had seemed inconsequential at the time. Now they were adding up to a picture of long-term planning and deception. After dinner, I called Jason to get Emma's information for Frank. The son sounded depressed. Dad, I've been thinking about our conversation all day. Tried to call Emma, but the phone is disconnected. That's suspicious. Maybe it's just a bad connection. Or a roaming problem. Maybe give me her full details. Name, date of birth, social security number. Why? I have someone I know who can check where she really is. Jason was quiet for a moment. Dad, do you really think she stole your money? What do you think? I don't. I don't want to think. But the facts speak for themselves. Then help me find out the truth. He dictated the details and I wrote them down in my notebook. Emma Louise Crawford, née Ryder, was born on March 15th, 1980, in Portland. All the information Frank would need for his search. After talking to my son, I sat down in my favorite chair and turned on the television. They were showing an old John Wayne movie I'd seen dozens of times, but I couldn't concentrate on the story. My thoughts kept going back to Emma, to how cleverly she played the role of caring daughter-in-law. Always asking about my health, helping me shop when Jason was busy, sending me birthday cards. The perfect wife for her son, the perfect daughter-in-law for a lonely old man. And now it turns out it was all an act. A long, carefully planned play to gain access to my money. Outside the window, the rain kept falling, but its monotonous pounding no longer seemed dull. It was the sound of time, counting down the hours until my meeting with the thief. And that meeting would happen no matter where Emma was hiding. 72 years of life had taught me one simple truth. Justice doesn't always come by itself. Sometimes you have to fight for it, and I was going to fight for it. Frank called back early the next day. I was just brewing coffee when the phone rang. The rain had stopped overnight, and the first rays of November sunshine were streaming through the windows. Ed, I've got news. Frank's voice sounded rather grim. And you're not going to like it. I set the cup aside and sat down at the table. Go ahead. I'll start with the good. Emma Crawford does exist. The information you gave me is correct. She's been working at the Harbor View Hotel for 4 years. Before that, she lived in Portland. What's the bad part? The bad thing is she doesn't have a sister, Rachel, in San Diego. None at all. Emma's only sister died of leukemia when she was a baby. That's what I found out through a friend at Portland PD. I felt my stomach tighten into a knot. So Emma lied about the purpose of her trip from the beginning. Anything else? Yeah, that's the best part. My buddy at the airline checked the passenger manifest. October 27th, Emma Crawford didn't fly to San Diego. She flew to San Jose, Costa Rica. One-way ticket, and she didn't fly out alone. I gripped the phone tighter. With who? A Roger Blake, 43 years old, owner of the Tropical Dreams travel agency here in Tonatown. He had a one-way ticket too. Roger Blake. The name sounded familiar, but I couldn't remember exactly where I'd heard it. Can you find out anything else about this, Blake? I already did. Divorced, no kids, started an agency 2 years ago, specializes in Central American tours. Office on Oak Street, near the hotel where your sister-in-law works. Interesting coincidence, isn't it? Of course it's not a coincidence. Emma must have met him through work. Tourists often stayed at the Harbor View Hotel, and an event coordinator could easily cross paths with the owner of a travel agency on work-related matters. Thanks, Frank. I owe you one. You're welcome. But Ed, be careful. If they went to Costa Rica with $80,000, they're not planning a quick return. They may not be planning to come back at all. After talking to Frank, I got into my old Toyota and drove downtown. I needed to see this Tropical Dreams office for myself and find out everything I could about Roger Blake. Oak Street was one of Town's main shopping streets, and even on a weekday was pretty crowded. I parked outside a bookstore and went looking for a travel agency. I found it pretty quickly. The brightly colored sign with palm trees and a tropical beach immediately caught my eye. The office was small, with large windows through which you could see racks of tourist brochures and posters of exotic countries. A closed sign hung on the door. I looked inside and saw empty desks, computers turned off. It looked like the agency hadn't been open for days. Looking for Roger? A voice behind me asked. I turned around. An elderly woman stood outside a nearby men's clothing store with a shopping bag in her hands. Yes, it was a business matter. He went on vacation, the woman shook her head. He said he would be back in a month. I've known him for 2 years, and he's never shut down the agency for so long. Even worked Christmas. When exactly did he leave? This week. Monday, I think. He was in such a hurry, he didn't even say goodbye. I used to buy trips from him. He was always polite. Monday, October 27th. Do you know where he's vacationing? He didn't say. He just mentioned something about the tropics. Well, that makes sense for a man who sells tours to hot countries, doesn't it? I thanked the woman and went back to the car. The picture was becoming clearer. Roger Blake hadn't just gone on vacation, he'd run away. And he'd run off with Emma and my money. Next stop was the Harborview Hotel. It was an imposing 4-story Victorian-style building, built in the early 20th century and recently restored. The hotel was considered one of the finest in Town, accommodating businessmen and tourists who could afford to pay for comfort. In the spacious lobby, I approached the front desk, where a young girl in a uniform jacket sat at the computer. Good afternoon. I need to speak to the manager about Emma Crawford. Emma? The girl raised an eyebrow. And who are you, I beg your pardon? Edward Crawford, her father-in-law. Family matters. The girl hesitated for a moment, then picked up the phone. Mr. Richardson, you have a visitor about Emma Crawford. Yes, her father-in-law. Okay. A couple of minutes later, a 45-year-old man in an expensive suit came out of the office behind the counter. Richardson, the hotel manager. I knew him by sight. We sometimes crossed paths at the local supermarket. Mr. Crawford, he extended his hand for a handshake. What can I do for you? I need some information on Emma. When was the last time she was at work? Monday, she took a 2-week vacation. Said she had a family emergency. What kind of family emergency? Richardson looked uncomfortable. Look, I realize you're family, but I can't give out personal information to employees. If you have any questions for Emma, it's best to go to her directly. Did she say she was visiting her sick sister? Something like that, yeah. What's the problem? Is something wrong? I've decided to play the odds. The problem is, Emma doesn't have a sick sister, and she didn't go to her in-laws. She went to Costa Rica with her lover, with my money. Richardson's face changed. Surprise changed to understanding, and then something like relief. Oh my God, he muttered. So it's true. What's true? Let's go to my office. The manager's office was expensively furnished and decorated with photographs of the hotel at various times in its history. Richardson closed the door and offered me a chair. For the past few months, I suspected Emma was having an affair, he began. She'd been absent from work a lot, taking personal calls, acting strange. Too much fun for someone who was supposedly unhappily married. Did she say she was unhappy? Not directly, but she implied it. Complained that her husband didn't appreciate her, that she deserved a better life, that she wanted to travel. And then she started mentioning a certain Roger a lot. Blake? Yes, the owner of a travel agency. He often came to the hotel, ostensibly on business, to discuss his clients' accommodations. But I saw the way they looked at each other. There was clearly more than a business relationship between them. How long did this go on? 3 months, maybe 4, since the summer. Roger became a regular at the hotel, and Emma suddenly became interested in traveling to Central America. She used to be more interested in the beaches of Florida. Richardson stood up and walked to the window overlooking the harbor. You know what surprises me the most? Emma was a good employee, responsible, punctual. Customers loved her. I was thinking of giving her a promotion next year, and now it turns out that he didn't finish the sentence, but I knew what he was thinking. Emma wasn't just deceiving Jason and me, she was deceiving everyone around her, pretending to be a decent person while she planned her escape. Thank you for your candor, I said, standing up. It helps a lot. If you manage to contact her, tell her she's fired. Richardson handed me a business card. Slarking, and if you need an official statement for the police or the court, I'm ready to testify. When I left the hotel, I got into my car and sat for a while, thinking about what I'd heard. The picture was becoming complete. Emma and Roger had been planning an escape for months. She had access to my money through Jason, and he had provided the logistics, tickets, a destination, maybe even a place to live in Costa Rica. $80,000 is a lot of money for a country like Costa Rica. With that money, you could live for a few years without working, or even buy a small business. Emma and her lover probably thought they had won the lottery, but they were wrong. I was a ship's engineer, used to solving complex technical problems under extreme conditions. I had connections, experience, and most importantly, motivation. They didn't just steal money, they stole my future, my safety, my dignity, and for that, they would have to pay. When I got home, I pulled out of my old desk the address book I'd kept for over 30 years. The pages were yellowed with time, and some of the entries were in faded ink, but most of the contacts were still current. During my 4 decades at sea, I had met hundreds of people all over the world. Port workers, customs officers, shipping company agents, technicians, radio operators. Many of them have long since retired, as I have, but the connections remain. In the maritime community, it's customary to help each other, especially old people who have given the best years of their lives to the sea. I found the right page and dialed Carlos Mendez's number in Puerto Limon, Costa Rica's main port on the Caribbean coast. Carlos worked as a dispatcher for the Port Authority and had once helped me solve a problem with a delayed shipment. That was about 15 years ago, but we corresponded by email from time to time. The phone didn't answer for a long time. Then a familiar voice with a distinctive Spanish accent sounded. Hello, sí, Carlos, it's Edward Crawford. Remember me? The ship's engineer from Atlantic Shipping. Edward, of course I remember you. How you doing, old boy? Haven't heard from you in a while. Things aren't good, Carlos. I need your help. It's very important. I briefly told him the situation without going into detail. I told him that my sister-in-law had stolen money and was hiding in Costa Rica with an accomplice, that I needed to find them. I see, Carlos said quietly. The police won't help? They'll take too long, and I need to act fast before they spend it all or move to another country. You got names? Emma Crawford and Roger Blake flew into San Jose on October 27th. San Jose is a long way from me. It's the Pacific coast, but I have friends at the airport and in the hotels. I'll see what I can find out. Only it'll take time. How long? 2 or 3 days. Maybe more. Tourists are not uncommon there. Americans come all the time. That's good. But I need one more thing. Can you organize, inconvenience to make their stay unpleasant? Carlos laughed. Edward, you haven't changed. I remember when you dealt with that port official in Valencia who demanded a bribe. What exactly are you talking about? ID problems, bank cards, hotel reservations. Nothing serious, just to let them know there's trouble in paradise. It can be arranged. I know people in the tourist police and banks. For a small fee, they can arrange a background check, freeze accounts on suspicion of money laundering. Standard procedure, nothing illegal. That's fine, I'll wire you $5,000 for labor and expenses. Edward, that's too much. No, it's just enough. These people stole 16 times that much from me. After I talked to Carlos, I called Frank Harris. I had a special request for him. Frank, can you come into the travel agent's office? You mean break in? Not break in. Enter legally. As an ex-cop conducting a private investigation at the request of a victim. Frank thought about it. Technically, it's possible. If there's reason to believe there's evidence of a crime. And do you have grounds to believe that? I think I do. Roger Blake closed the agency the same day he left with Emma. He may have left documents there that could help us understand their plans. What exactly are you looking for? A computer, documents, correspondence. Anything that might help us figure out how long they've been planning their escape. If they have bank accounts, real estate. Okay, cell phone rings. But I'm gonna need an official reason. A complaint from a client of the agency, for example. I remember an elderly woman outside a clothing store. There's a witness who said she bought trips from him. Mrs. Shit, I didn't get her last name. But it's not hard to find her. She works at the store next door. We'll find her. In the meantime, get on the banking side of things. If Blake has business accounts, credit, partners, it could give us some leverage. I spent the next 2 days methodically gathering information. Through the internet, I found out that the travel agency, Tropical Dreams, was incorporated 2 years ago, had a travel license and a clean credit history. Roger Blake rented the office from a local real estate company with the lease expiring at the end of the year. More interestingly, the agency specialized specifically in tours to Costa Rica and neighboring Central American countries. The agency's website was full of photos of local hotels, restaurants, and attractions. Blake clearly knew the country well and had established connections there. Thursday morning, Frank called with the news. Sulam, we got into the office, he reported, officially on a complaint from Mrs. Elizabeth Cornwell, who bought a tour from Blake for next week and can't reach him. What did they find? He took the computer, but he left a bunch of paperwork, hotel contracts, brochures, correspondence with local tour operators. And here's the interesting thing. All the contacts in Costa Rica are centered in one region, Guanacaste province on the Pacific coast. Huh? Does that mean anything? Means that if your Emma and Blake stayed in Costa Rica, that's where we should be looking for them. According to the paperwork, Blake has arrangements with several hotels in Tamarindo and neighboring resorts. Tamarindo. I wrote down the name and immediately found the town on a map on the internet. A small resort on the Pacific coast, popular with American tourists. Beautiful beaches, expensive hotels, restaurants. Perfect place for a couple of fugitives with stolen money. Anything else? Yeah, bank records. Looks like Blake took out a loan against the agency just a month ago. $50,000. The paperwork says it was for business development, but the agency closed a month after he got the loan, so the escape was planned in advance. Blake took out the loan knowing full well he wasn't going to pay it back. Combined with the money they stole from me, it gave them a startup capital of $130,000. What happens to the loan? The bank will default after a month of non-payment. Then they'd start foreclosure proceedings, but there'd be nothing to collect. The agency had almost no assets. I hung up the phone and sat down to think about the situation. The picture was becoming clearer and clearer. Roger and Emma hadn't just absconded with my money. They'd pulled off a well-planned operation, a loan secured by the agency, access to my accounts through Jason, a prearranged location in Costa Rica. They thought of every detail, but they left one thing out. They didn't know who they were dealing with. That evening, Carlos called. Edward, I have news. Your couple has been found. Where? The Playa Negra Hotel in Tamarindo. They rented a suite for a month, paid in cash. Registered as Mr. and Mrs. Blake. I felt a sense of satisfaction. So Frank was right about the Guanacaste province. Good job. What about the inconvenience? It's already started. Yesterday, they were stopped on the beach by tourist cops for an ID check. Today, the bank froze their credit cards on suspicion of unusual activity. Tomorrow, they'll have trouble making reservations. The hotel will get an anonymous complaint about noisy guests. That's great. Keep up the good work. Edward, what do you plan to do next? Are you going to fly to them? I looked out the window at the darkening Tonetown sky. Somewhere thousands of miles away, under the hot Central American sun, Two thieves thought they had managed to fool an old fool and steal his savings with impunity. A week after my conversation with Carlos, I received a detailed report from him about how Emma and Roger were spending their time in their tropical paradise. The information came through his contacts at hotels, restaurants, and tourist services in Tamarindo. Their first few days in Costa Rica were like a rich American tourist's honeymoon. A suite overlooking the ocean for $400 a night, dinners at the best restaurants in the resort, excursions on a private yacht, shopping for expensive clothes and jewelry. Emma bought several dresses from local designers. Roger rented a sports car and drove around the mountain roads of the province. They behaved exactly the way people who suddenly received a large sum of money and were not used to luxury behave. Spending widely, not counting, enjoying every minute of their supposed wealth. Carlos emailed me some photos of his men at restaurants and beaches. In the pictures, Emma looked happy and relaxed, not at all like the woman who had just ruined an old man's life. She was laughing, hugging Roger, posing by the pool in an expensive bikini. Roger looked content with life too, tanned, wearing white linen shirts and expensive sunglasses. This nonchalance made me angrier than the theft itself. They had stolen my savings and were now spending it on empty entertainment, not even thinking about the fact that I might not be able to pay my heating bill or my medication. But gradually the picture began to change. At first it was little things. They were denied cash withdrawals at the ATM. The security system had blocked the cards because of suspicious activity abroad. They had to go to the bank, prove that they were the real account holders, and fill out paperwork. The procedure took half a day. Then the problems with the hotel began. An anonymous complaint from a neighboring room about loud music and drunkenness forced the administration to hold a preventive conversation with the guests. Emma and Roger were forced to explain that they did not organize any parties. The tourist police were not slumbering either. Twice during the week they were stopped to check their documents, then on the beach, then near the restaurant. Technically, these were ordinary raids, but for some reason the police scrutinized their passports and visas, asking a lot of questions about the purpose of their visit and their sources of income. Carlos sent me regular reports, and I could see the fugitives' moods gradually changing. Emma didn't look so carefree in the photos from the end of the first week. Roger frowned when he thought no one could see him. The most effective strike was through the banking system. Carlos had arranged with the manager of one of San Jose's largest banks, and the manager had initiated a review of the accounts of American tourists on suspicion of money laundering. The procedure was standard and perfectly legal. When foreigners transfer or spend large sums of cash, banks have the right to freeze transactions until the circumstances are clarified. Emma and Roger's accounts were frozen for 72 hours. During that time, they could not withdraw money, use credit cards, or make transfers. For 3 days, they lived on the cash they had in their wallets. And there wasn't much cash. The hotel required daily payments, renting a car cost $100 a day, dinners at restaurants cost another $100 or $200. By the end of the first week, they were out of pocket money. I imagined Roger fidgeting, calling American banks, trying to figure out the reasons for the blockage. How Emma, for the first time during their romantic getaway, was beginning to realize that something was going wrong. But that was just the beginning. On their 8th day in Costa Rica, Carlos informed me of a new development. Emma and Roger had tried to move out of the expensive hotel and find cheaper accommodations, but it turned out that all the decent hotels in Tamarindo were suddenly full. The receptionist politely informed them that there were no places available and recommended that they contact neighboring towns. Of course, there were rooms, but Carlos had agreed in advance with the hotel owners that it would be better not to rent rooms to this couple. They said that they might have problems with the police. In a small resort town where everyone knows each other, such rumors spread quickly. In the end, Emma and Roger were forced to stay at Playa Negra, continuing to overpay for a suite that no longer brought them pleasure. The most satisfying moment came on the 9th day. Carlos sent me a picture taken at a restaurant on the beach. Emma was sitting at a table overlooking the ocean, but instead of a happy smile, there was an expression of irritation and worry on her face. Roger was explaining something to her, waving his arms, and she was looking at him with obvious displeasure. Paradise was beginning to turn into hell, and that was exactly what I was looking for. Meanwhile, back in Tontay Town, I continued to gather information and prepare the next stages of my plan. The bank had completed its preliminary investigation and confirmed that the money had been transferred without my consent. This gave me official grounds to file a police report. I also found out more details about Roger Blake's past. It turned out that 2 years ago, he had declared bankruptcy after a failed investment in a restaurant business in a neighboring state. The travel agency in Tonatown had been his attempt at a fresh start, but apparently the habit of easy money had taken over. Emma also had an interesting history. She had been married to a Portland realtor before meeting Jason, but the marriage had broken up because of her affair with a client. According to her ex-husband, contacted by Frank Harris, Emma had always dreamed of a life of luxury, but was unwilling to work to achieve it. This information supported my theory that the theft was planned in advance. Emma was looking for a way to get rich without effort, and Roger provided her with that opportunity. My money wasn't just a fluke for them, but a goal they had been working toward for months. Realizing this strengthened my resolve to see it through. By the end of the week, I got the message I'd been waiting for from Carlos. Emma and Roger had tried to fly from San Jose to Panama, but there had been a problem with their documents at the airport. Customs officers spent a long time examining their passports, checking their luggage, asking questions about their purpose of travel and sources of income. In the end, they missed their flight and had to return to Tamarindo. Tickets for the next flight cost twice as much, and they had less and less money left. I sat in my living room in Town, sipped my evening tea, and read Carlos' reports with growing satisfaction. Every line confirmed the effectiveness of my plan. Emma and Roger were beginning to realize that their escape was turning into a nightmare. But the most important part was ahead. Emma and Roger's 10th day in Costa Rica was a turning point. Carlos sent me a picture taken outside a bank in downtown Tamarindo. It showed Emma standing at the entrance to the building with a look of despair on her face, and Roger smoking nervously beside her. They were clearly trying to solve yet another problem with blocked accounts. It turned out that the banking difficulties were just the tip of the iceberg. Carlos informed me that there had been an incident at their hotel that night. Allegedly, the air conditioning system in their room broke down, and they had to spend the night in 35-degree heat with no way to cool the room. The hotel management apologized but said there were no rooms available, and the repairman would not be able to come until 2 days later. I knew there was no malfunction. It was another malfunction orchestrated by Carlos's men. But Emma and Roger didn't realize it and spent a sleepless night arguing with each other and the hotel staff. The next morning, the situation deteriorated even more. When they arrived at the hotel restaurant for breakfast, the waiter politely informed them that their credit card had been declined and suggested they pay the bill in cash. It turned out that the bank had frozen their accounts again, this time at the request of the Costa Rican tax authorities, who were conducting an audit of the foreigners' large cash transactions. They had cash left for a few days of their lives, no more. Roger tried to contact his contacts in the travel business, but found that many of them were suddenly unavailable or busy with other matters. The atmosphere of friendliness that had surrounded them in the first few days had evaporated like morning fog. At noon that day, an event occurred that finally broke their morale. The tourist police searched their room on an anonymous tip about possible drug possession. Of course, no drugs were found, but the procedure took 3 hours, during which Emma and Roger were forced to stand in the hallway under the supervision of officers while their belongings were carefully gone through. Carlos sent me a video taken by a hidden camera in the hotel lobby. The footage shows Emma crying in a chair near the front desk and Roger pacing back and forth, waving his arms and explaining something vehemently to the receptionist. Their luxury vacation had turned into a nightmare, and they didn't understand why. It was at this point that I decided to strike a decisive blow. I dialed Jason's number. The time in Costa Rica was 2 hours behind ours, so it was late evening there. Jason answered after a few beeps. "Hey, Dad, what's up?" "Jason, I need to talk to you." "A serious talk." "About what?" "About your wife. You're getting a divorce today." Pause. A long, hard pause. "Dad, what are you talking about? Emma's at her sister's, helping her with—" "Jason, stop lying." I raised my voice. "Emma doesn't have a sister in San Diego. She's in Costa Rica with her lover, and they're spending my stolen money." "That's impossible." "It is, and I have proof. Photographs, bank records, witness statements. Your wife is a thief and a whore, and if you don't file for divorce today, I'll go to the police not only on her, but on you as an accessory. I could hear my son breathing heavily, trying to comprehend what I was hearing. Dad, even if it's true, I can't just file for divorce. I need to talk to her, find out. Talk? I laughed bitterly. She stole $80,000, my retirement savings, the money I was going to live on for the rest of my life. What's there to talk about? But maybe there's an explanation. There is an explanation. Your wife has been planning this for months. She used you to gain access to my accounts. She used your gullibility and my love for my son, and now she's having fun in a tropical paradise with a man she's been fucking for 6 months. Jason was silent. I could only hear his breathing and the distant sound of the TV. Where are you now? He finally asked. At home. And you? I'm home too. Alone. Emma was supposed to call yesterday, but she didn't. Or the day before that, either. You know why? Because she's busy. Very busy, spending my money and fucking her lover in a fancy hotel. Do you want me to send you pictures? No, don't. There were tears in his voice. I felt sorry for my son, but pity was a luxury I couldn't afford. Jason had to understand the truth, no matter how painful it was. Listen to me carefully, I said more gently. Tomorrow morning, you go to a lawyer and file for divorce. You'll ask for property division and alimony if possible. At the same time, I'm filing a theft report with the police. If you cooperate, you won't be prosecuted as an accessory. And if I don't, then you're no longer my son. Those words hung in the air like a sentence. I wasn't bluffing. I'd learned to make tough decisions in my life, and this was one of them. Okay, Jason whispered. Okay, I'll do it, but I want to hear from her. I want her to tell me. Try to get her on the phone, but I bet she's having trouble getting through all of a sudden. After talking to my son, I called Carlos. It was late in Costa Rica, but he answered right away. Edward, how are you? I'm fine. I just got off the phone with my son. He's filing for divorce tomorrow. Now I need to put more pressure on the couple. What exactly do you want? Total lockdown, block their cell phones, hotel internet, international access. Make it impossible for them to contact the outside world. It's more complicated, but it's possible. Cell phone carriers sometimes block numbers on suspicion of fraud, and with the internet in the hotel is easier. There the system often fails. How long will the blocking last? 3 or 4 days. Then they will find ways to bypass the restrictions or go to the American consulate. That'll do it. What's next? Then I fly to them. I want to look into the eyes of the people who thought they could steal from a 72-year-old man and get away with it. Edward, it could be dangerous. If they're pinned up against the wall, then they'll realize the game is over. Either they return the money voluntarily, or I'll turn over the files to the American and Costa Rican authorities. Let them choose. Carlos was quiet. What if they choose the third option? Try to escape even farther? I looked out the window at the dark Tonytown street where yellow streetlights illuminated the empty sidewalk. Somewhere thousands of miles away, the two men who had ruined my life were trying to figure out why their dream had turned into a nightmare. Then I'll chase them to the end of the world, I said calmly. I have the time, the connections, and the motivation, and they're running out of money, patience, and options. The hunt was on. Jason showed up at my door the next morning at 7:30. I was making breakfast when I heard the bell ring. Through the peephole, I saw my son, disheveled, unshaven, in the same clothes he'd been wearing yesterday. He looked like he'd been up all night. I opened the door and Jason walked in without waiting for an invitation. His eyes were red from fatigue and tears. I've been trying to call her all night, he said without greeting. The phone's not available. Not at all. Sit down. Do you want coffee? I don't want anything. He sank into the chair and covered his face with his hands. Dad, tell me this can't be true. Tell me there's some mistake. I poured him coffee and put the cup on the coffee table. There's no mistake, son. Emma was lying to you. She lied to me, all of us. But why? I loved her. I gave her everything I could. I sat across from him. 40 years ago, I sat across from Martha in the same way when she told me about her mother's death. I didn't know how to comfort my wife then. Now I didn't know how to comfort my son. All you could give wasn't enough for Emma. She wanted more. A lot more. 5 years of marriage. Didn't she love me all that time? I don't know. Maybe she loved me in her own way. But love wasn't enough when the opportunity came to get rich. Jason raised his head and looked at me. Show me the proof. I want to see it all. I spent the next hour showing him documents, photos, bank statements, told him about Roger Blake, about the travel agency, about how Frank had discovered their flight to Costa Rica, showed the pictures Carlos had sent, Emma and Roger in restaurants, on the beach, in the hotel. Jason studied each picture in silence. In one of them, Emma was kissing Roger by the pool. When he saw that picture, his face turned white as chalk. When did it start? He asked hoarsely. From the information Frank had gathered, about 3 months ago, maybe earlier. So when she said she was working late, when she went to a friend's house for the weekend, when she had a headache and didn't want to be intimate? Probably yes. Jason stood up and walked over to the window, stood with his back to me for a long time, looking out at the street. I'm a fool, he said finally, a complete fool. All the signs were there, and I hadn't noticed. You're not a fool. You're gullible, just like I was when I agreed to give you access to the accounts. But I gave her the passwords. I did. He turned on me. She said she wanted to help you with your banking when I wasn't home, said it would be nice of her. And I believed her. She used you in a very clever way. Jesus, Dad, I'm sorry. Forgive me for being so blind. I made you lose all your savings. I stood up and put my hand on his shoulder. We were both victims. But what's important now is not self-abuse, but action. Are you going to see a lawyer? Yeah, today. I want to file for divorce on grounds of adultery and theft. That's fine. I'll file a police report. That's when my home phone rang. I looked at the caller ID. It was an international call, Costa Rica. It could be her, I said to Jason. Do you want to talk? Jason nodded and I picked up the phone, putting it on speaker. Hello? Edward? Emma's voice sounded worried and confused. It's Emma. I need to talk to Jason. His cell phone isn't answering. I looked at my son. He was pale, but he nodded. Emma, Jason said, I'm here. Jason, thank God, we're in some trouble here. The police are bothering us with checks, the banks have frozen our cards, and strange things are happening at the hotel. I think someone's following us. Someone's following us? Jason looked at me. Who would that be? I don't know. Maybe the local mafia or Roger's competitors. We need help. Can you send some money through a wire transfer? Send money? Jason's voice got harder. For what exactly? Well, living expenses, tickets home, problem solving. All we have left is cash and not much of it. Emma, Jason said slowly, where did you get the money for this vacation? A pause, a long, eloquent pause. What do you mean? We've been saving up. Don't lie to me, Jason exploded. I know about the transfer from Dad's account. I know about the $80,000. I know about Roger Blake. Silence, then I heard Emma breathing heavily. Jason, it's not what you think. What is it? Explain to me what it is, if not stealing money from an old man for the sake of your affair with another man. Yeah, we were going to return the money. When? After you spent it all on a lavish life in the tropics? Jason, please let me explain. Explain. Another pause. I heard voices in the background, someone speaking Spanish. Okay, Emma finally said. Yes, I took that money, but it was a loan. I was going to pay it back with interest. A loan? Jason laughed bitterly. No one asked Dad for permission. He wouldn't have given it. He would have said it was too risky. And he'd be right. What kind of investment is this that requires stealing money? Roger knows people here. He has an opportunity to buy a stake in a resort that's just being built. The profit could be 300% in a year. It could have been, Jason corrected. He might not. And then what? Dad wouldn't have a livelihood? We'd figure something out. Meanwhile, you're spending his money on restaurants and hotels. I heard Emma crying. Jason, I know what I did was wrong, but we need help now. Something's going on here. Roger says it looks like a targeted harassment. Roger's right, I said, picking up the phone. It's a targeted stalking. Edward? Emma's voice shook. What do you mean? I mean that I have friends in Costa Rica, and they're helping me make your life there as unpleasant as possible. Is that, you're the one who organized all this trouble? I did. Card blocking, police checks, hotel problems, all mine. And that's just the beginning. But why? We were going to get the money back. When? In a year? 2 years? What if your investment fails? Emma, you stole my retirement savings, everything I have, and you're spending it on sex with your lover in a fancy hotel. We're not just having fun. We're working on a project. Akun, what project, Emma? Jason's voice was full of disgust. A project to live a whore's life on someone else's dime? Don't talk to me like that. I'll say what I want. You're not my wife anymore. I'm filing for divorce today. Emma sobbed out loud. Jason, don't do this. I love you. It's a mistake. It's stupid. I'll come back and we'll make it right. It's too late, Jason said coldly. Too late. I don't trust you anymore. And I'll never forgive what you did to Dad. He hung up. There was silence in the house. Jason stood in the middle of the living room, breathing hard, as if after a long run. It's over, he said quietly. Yeah, I agreed. It's over. After talking to Emma, Jason sat silent for a long time, staring at the floor. I brewed a fresh pot of coffee and put a new cup in front of him. He didn't even look at it. 5 years, he mumbled finally. Chihuahua, 5 years I lived with someone I didn't know at all. You knew the Emma she wanted to seem, I said. A caring wife, a working woman, a faithful partner. The problem is, that image was a lie. When did you realize she wasn't? I thought about it, trying to remember the exact moment when I first doubted Emma's sincerity. I guess I'd sensed something wrong from the beginning. But I put it down to generational differences, to the fact that people today were more pragmatic. Martha always said Emma looked too perfect for the common man. Didn't Mama love her? Not that she didn't like her, more like she didn't trust her. Martha had good instincts about people. She saw Emma studying our house when she thought no one could see her, how she counted the value of the furniture, the paintings, how she wondered about my savings. Jason finally picked up his cup and took a sip of coffee. I remember that conversation last summer when she asked about your investments. At the time, I thought she was just concerned about your future. And I thought she was calculating the size of the inheritance you'd get when I died. Jesus, Jason shook his head. How could I have been so blind? Love makes people blind, especially men. We see what we want to see, not what's really there. The phone rang again. This time it was Frank Harris. Ed, I've got news. Is Jason with you? Yeah, he's here. Good. Cell phone rings. Put him on speaker. He needs to hear this too. I pressed the speakerphone button. Go ahead, Frank. I finished going through Blake's financials. It's an interesting picture. In addition to the $50,000 loan he took out a month ago, he has about $20,000 in credit card debt, plus 3 months' worth of office rent. So he was on the verge of bankruptcy? Worse, he was already bankrupt. He just hadn't filed yet. The travel agency's been losing money from the start. According to his tax returns, in the 2 years he'd been in business, he'd earned less than he'd spent. Jason looked up. So the story about the investment in the resort is a lie too? Most likely, yes, Frank answered. I checked through my contacts in Costa Rica. There are no new resort projects being built in the Tamarindo area, at least none that Americans could invest in. So they just decided to spend the money on a life of luxury, I said. It looks that way. A classic scheme. Steal the money and flee to a country where it's hard to find and even harder to extradite. What about their current situation? Your buddy Carlos did a great job. Their accounts have been blocked for 4 days. The hotel charged them for allegedly damaged furniture in their room, so they'll have to pay extra. The tourist police had filed a report for visa violations. They'd stayed on the beach past the authorized time. I grinned. Carlos had a truly creative way of organizing trouble. How much money did they have left? I estimated no more than $2,000 or $3,000 in cash. At Costa Rican prices, that's not much, especially if you're staying in an expensive hotel. What are their escape options? Limited. The airport is controlled. The border with Panama has their photos handed over to the Border Patrol. Seaports are being checked, too. They're stuck. After talking to Frank, I pulled out a file folder and showed Jason the full picture of Emma's betrayal. Look, I spread the bank statements out on the table. Here's a history of my account activity over the last 6 months. See these small transfers in March, April, May? $500, $1,000 each? Jason leaned over the papers. I do. What are these? Emma was testing the system, seeing if small transfers would be noticed, how quickly I check my statements, if I react to small balance changes. And you didn't notice? I did. But when I asked you, you said they were bank fees or automatic charges for services. I trusted your explanation. And I trusted Emma when she said she knew banking better than me. I showed him other documents, printouts of emails Frank found in Blake's office. Here's your wife's correspondence with travel agencies in Costa Rica. It's dated June of this year. She's been planning the trip for 4 months. Jason read the emails and his face grew darker and darker. Here she was inquiring about long-term villa rentals, the possibility of residency status, the transfer of large sums of money. Was she planning to stay there permanently? Looks like it, at least for a few years, until the money runs out. What about me? What about our marriage? She only needed you to access my accounts. Once the money was stolen, you became a liability, a witness who could turn her into the police. Jason put the papers aside and stood up, walking to the window. So she'd been planning the divorce all along. Not the divorce, disappearance. She'd just disappear and you'd be left to deal with the consequences. The banks, the police, my charges. But why did she call today? Why ask for help if she was planning to disappear forever? Because the plan failed. My countermeasures worked too well. Instead of a carefree life in paradise, they got a series of troubles and more money being spent than planned. I showed him the latest document, the photo Carlos had sent the night before. Here they are yesterday at the Tamarindo police station. They were detained for an unpaid bill at a restaurant. It turned out that their credit card was blocked and they didn't have enough cash to cover the $200 bill. The picture showed Emma sitting on a bench at the station, disheveled and crying. Roger was standing next to her, arguing with a police officer about something. Both looked tired and frightened. There was no trace of the former gloss of their tropical romance. How long will they last? Jason asked. At their present rate of spending, no more than a week. Then they'd either have to find work or go to the American consulate for help getting home. And if they go to the consulate, then they will be deported as visa violators. And when they arrive in the U.S., the police will be waiting for them on theft charges. Jason turned to me. Dad, I want you to know that I'm gonna do everything I can to get your money back. Sell the house, the car, everything we have in common with Emma. That's not even enough for a third of the money. Then I'll be paying you back for years, but I'll pay back every dime. I looked at my son, the tired, haggard face, the determination in his eyes, the willingness to take responsibility for someone else's crimes. Thank you, I said, but first we'll try to recover the money from the thieves themselves. Outside the window, the rain began to drizzle. Somewhere in Costa Rica, under the hot tropical sun, 2 fugitives were trying to understand how their dream had turned into a nightmare. And in frigid Town, my son and I were planning their future fate. Jason filed divorce papers Wednesday morning. Attorney Martin Colby, whom we had found through Frank's recommendation, was an experienced family law attorney with 20 years of experience. He listened carefully to our story and assured us that the case would not be complicated. Under these circumstances, the divorce will go quickly, Colby said, looking over the documents. Adultery plus theft of marital funds are grounds for immediate dissolution without a reconciliation period. What about the division of property? Jason asked. Since Emma has committed a crime against the family, the court may disqualify her from half of the jointly acquired property. The house, the car, the bank accounts, everything stays with you. I listened to their conversation and thought about how quickly what had been built over the years crumbles. 5 years ago, Jason had been a happy groom who believed he had met the love of his life. Now he was sitting in a lawyer's office, legally ending that illusion marriage. After visiting Colby, we drove to the police station where I filed a formal theft report. Detective Raymond Taylor, who took the case, carefully reviewed all the paperwork and assured me that we had enough evidence to prosecute. We will send a request to Interpol, he said. If your daughter-in-law tries to return to the United States, she will be detained at the airport. And if she tries to flee to another country, then we'll work through international channels. Costa Rica is cooperating with us on extradition. By the end of the week, our administrative files were in order. Jason was officially a divorcing man, I was a criminal victim, and Emma was a wanted criminal. Meanwhile, Carlos sent regular reports on the situation in Costa Rica. Emma and Roger's situation was getting worse by the day. First, they ran out of money for an expensive hotel. The administration of the Playa Negra politely but firmly asked them to vacate the room because the bill had not been paid for 3 days. They were forced to move to a cheap motel on the outskirts of Tamarindo, where for $40 a night they got a dirty room with an air conditioner that worked only once. Then the food problems began. Credit cards were still blocked and cash was critically low. Instead of restaurants, they bought cheap food from supermarkets and cooked in the motel's communal kitchen. Roger tried to contact his contacts in the travel business, but found that most of them had suddenly become unreachable. The few who answered the phone said they couldn't help. Too many problems with the authorities lately. Carlos sent me a video taken by a hidden camera outside the motel. The footage shows Emma and Roger arguing outside her room. She waves her arms and yells something at him. He turns away and smokes without looking at her. The romantic idyll was clearly cracking at the seams. The turning point came Sunday morning. Carlos called me with the news. "Edward, your couple has split up." "How so?" Roger had escaped. Overnight, he took all the remaining cash from their shared stash and disappeared. Emma woke up in the morning alone. With no money and no lover, I felt a grim satisfaction. Honor among thieves had turned out to be a myth, as one might expect. Where had he gone? My men saw him on a bus to San Jose at 5 in the morning, probably trying to fly to a third country, Panama or Nicaragua. "You want me to stop him?" "No, let him run. He stole someone else's money and now he's stealing from his accomplice. People like that punish themselves." "What about Emma?" "Keep an eye on her. I think she's going to try to come home soon." Carlos was right. The very next day, Emma showed up at the U.S. consulate in San Jose. According to Carlos, who had contacts there as well, she said she had lost her money and documents and asked for help getting back to the United States. The consulate offered her the standard procedure for Americans in trouble, a temporary passport and credit for a ticket home, which would then have to be paid back to the government. Emma accepted immediately. 2 days later, she was on a plane to Miami. Another day later, she was standing at the door of our house in Tontitown. I saw her through the peephole, thin, tanned, in crumpled clothes with disheveled hair. There was no trace of the former glitz of a luxury hotel event coordinator. She looked like the refugee she really was. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. "Edward," she said, and I could hear the desperation in her voice. "I need to talk to you." "About what?" "About the money. About what happened. I can explain." "You can explain to the court. I filed a police report on you." Emma's face turned pale under her tan. "But hear me out. It didn't go as planned. Roger tricked me, just like you deceived us. Where's my money?" It's gone. Roger took it all and ran. I was the victim." "Victimized?" I chuckled. "You stole $80,000 from a 72-year-old man and called it an investment. And now you're calling yourself a victim?" "I was going to pay the money back with a profit." Roger said he knew a surefire way to make money. Roger said a lot of things, like he loves you. "Where is he now?" Emma cried. "I don't know. He disappeared in the night, took all the money, left me destitute in a foreign country." "And how did that make you feel? No money in a foreign country?" She looked at me through her tears. "I understand that you're angry." "I'm not angry, Emma. I'm ruined. You stole my old age, my security, my future, and spent it on a romantic vacation with a man who abandoned you at the first hurdle. But I'm ready to make it up to you. I'm going to work. I'm going to pay off my debt." "Achin, you're going to jail for grand larceny." That's when Jason's car pulled up to the house. He got out and saw Emma at the door. There was no emotion on his face, no anger, no joy, no relief, just a cold calm. "Hi, Emma," he said as he approached us. "Did you have a good trip?" "Jason," she rushed toward him, but he backed away. "Jason, I'm sorry. I'll make it up to you. We can start over." "No," he said simply. "We can't. But I love you. It was a mistake. It was stupid. Roger deceived me. Roger deceived you, and you deceived me. And Dad, the chain of betrayal is over. Jason, please. I filed for divorce, Emma. The papers are in court, and the house is no longer yours. Take your things and go. She stood between us, the two men whose lives she'd ruined, and for the first time, I think she realized that the game was over. That crying and pleading wouldn't help, that some mistakes can't be undone. Where do I go? She whispered. I don't have money. I don't have a place to live. To your parents, Jason said, or to a friend's house, or a hotel. It doesn't concern me anymore. He walked past her into the house without even looking back. Emma looked at me one last time. Edward, please. Goodbye, Emma, I said, and closed the door. An hour later, a police car pulled up to the house. Detective Taylor arrested Emma right outside our house. I watched from the living room window as she got into the police car in handcuffs. Her face was pale, but she wasn't crying anymore. Perhaps she'd finally realized that tears wouldn't help. Jason stood next to me at the window. We watched in silence as the car disappeared around the corner. How are you feeling? I asked. Strange, my son answered. For 5 years I thought I knew this man. Now I realize I didn't know him at all. It's as if someone I loved had died and a stranger had taken his place. Do you feel sorry for her? I guess I should feel sorry for her, but I don't. I feel sorry for the time I wasted on the illusion. The next few weeks were spent worrying about the trial. Colby's attorney kept us regularly updated on the progress of the case. Emma hired a defense attorney who tried to secure bail, but the judge refused, believing the defendant might abscond. Frank Harris helped gather additional evidence. Bank records, testimony from hotel employees, correspondence with Roger all painted a clear picture of a premeditated crime planned in advance. Roger Blake was never found. According to Interpol, he flew from San Jose to Panama, from there to Colombia, and then the trail was lost. Perhaps he got to some country without an extradition treaty and now lives under a false name. Or maybe someone had already killed him for debt or fraud. These things happen in South America. I didn't care. Roger stole someone else's money and then betrayed his accomplice. People like that rarely end well, and karma will catch up with him sooner or later. I was more interested in Emma's fate. Every week I received a report from Detective Taylor about her situation in the county jail. She was being held in a shared cell, working in the laundry room, trying to connect with her cellmates. Her attorney advised her to plead guilty and ask for leniency, but Emma stubbornly insisted on her innocence. She claimed that she did not know about Roger's criminal intentions, that she believed in the legality of the investment project, that she herself had been the victim of deception. The story sounded unconvincing, especially in light of the correspondence found, but Emma clung to it like a straw. In December, there was a preliminary hearing. I was in the courtroom, sitting in the front row, watching Emma answer the prosecutor's questions. She looked tired and aged from her 2 months in prison. Her prison clothes were too big, her hair was in a sloppy ponytail, and she wore no makeup. When the prosecutor asked her why she had not informed me of the money transfer, Emma said she was afraid I would not realize the importance of the investment opportunity. When asked about her connection to Roger, she stated that it was purely a business friendship. The judge heard the testimony and set the main hearing for January. Bail was still denied. In the meantime, Jason began to put his shattered life back in order. The divorce went quickly and smoothly. Emma didn't even show up for the hearing because she was incarcerated. The house, car, and bank accounts were left to Jason. But to my surprise, my son made an unexpected decision. Dad, I'm selling the house, he announced one December evening. We were sitting in my living room, drinking tea and watching an old movie on TV. Why? It's a nice house. You lived there for 5 years. That's why. Every room reminds me of her, how we chose the furniture, planned the future, dreamed of children. I can't live there anymore. Where are you going to move? I haven't decided yet. Maybe I'll get an apartment downtown. Or maybe I'll leave Tuntown altogether. Everyone here knows our story. Everyone looks at us with pity or curiosity. I understood how he felt. A small town can be cruel to those at the center of a scandal. Gossip, slanted glances, the obsessive sympathy of neighbors. All of these things can poison a life. What about your job? I can work remotely. Technical writing doesn't require physical presence in an office. Jason's house sold quickly. It was bought through a realtor by a young family who didn't know its history. The son got $120,000 for it, which partially covered my losses. He insisted on giving me that money. "It's not full compensation," he said, handing over the check, "but it's at least part of what you lost through my fault." "Your fault?" "I gave her access to your accounts. If it wasn't for me, she wouldn't have been able to steal the money." "You trusted your wife." "That's normal in a marriage. It's okay to trust, but it's not okay to be blind." "Mom saw something was wrong with Emma. You felt it too. I was the only one who didn't see anything." There was a trial in January. Emma ended up pleading guilty in exchange for a reduced sentence. She was given 3 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 18 months. The sentence seemed fair to me. Not too harsh for a woman who had acted under the influence of a lover, but enough to make her realize the cost of her actions. The day of the verdict was the last time I saw Emma in the courtroom. As the judge read the verdict, she stood straight, not crying, not begging for mercy. Perhaps the months of incarceration had finally made her realize the gravity of what she had done. After the verdict was read, she turned around and looked at me. There was something in her eyes that looked like remorse, but could have been regret at being caught. I didn't nod back at her, didn't smile, just stared at the woman who had ruined my old age and nearly destroyed my son. Jason left Tontock Town in February. He got a job with a Seattle company, got an apartment there, started a new life. We call every week. He visits for the holidays, but I can see that he needs time to heal. He blames himself for what happened, even though I've explained to him many times that the real blame lies solely with Emma. But guilt is irrational, and my son will have to deal with it on his own. And I was alone in my house in Tontown. Alone but not broken. The money from the sale of Jason's house and the partial compensation from the bank's insurance company gave me a way to not be poor. Not wealth, but enough for a modest old age. Every morning I brew coffee, read the paper, check the mail. Sometimes Frank Harris calls, tells me the news, invites me fishing. Sometimes Jason comes over and we have dinner together, reminisce about Martha, talk about his plans. Emma's serving time in a women's correctional facility 200 miles from here. Rumor has it she's been reassigned to the library, working on paperwork, behaving herself. Maybe she's truly remorseful. Maybe she just wants an early release. I don't care. Justice has been done, and that's enough. In the evenings, I sit in the chair where Martha used to sit and look at the pictures on the dresser. Our golden wedding, Jason with his diploma, family celebrations from those years when we didn't yet know the trials that awaited us. There's no more anger at Emma. There's the satisfaction of knowing a crime didn't go unpunished. And there is the peace of a man who defended his dignity and did not let himself be robbed with impunity. 72 years have taught me one simple truth. In life, it's not what happens to you that matters, but how you react to it.